The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and I watched champagne pool around my mother-in-law's designer heels. She didn't even flinch. She just stared at me with that twisted smile, the one that said she'd been waiting for this moment all night. "Well," she announced to the 150 guests crammed into the country club ballroom, "I suppose we should all know the truth about the little gold digger my son married." The words echoed off the vaulted ceilings, bouncing between crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly rent. I felt every eye in that room turn toward me, felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing pressing down on my shoulders. My hands were shaking. I couldn't make them stop shaking. 3 months earlier, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. I was 28 and working as an executive assistant to Richard Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Industries, one of Chicago's most successful manufacturing companies. The man was worth somewhere north of $40 million, and he ran his empire from a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I'd worked for him for 3 years, and in all that time, I'd never once thought of him romantically. He was 52, recently divorced, and treated me with the kind of professional courtesy that made me feel valued, but never uncomfortable. My morning started at 6:30. I'd arrive at the office by 7:15, always before Mr. Caldwell, and have his coffee ready, his schedule organized, his briefing materials prepared. He drank his coffee black with exactly 1 sugar cube, and he liked his newspapers arranged in a specific order: Wall Street Journal, Chicago Tribune, then the Financial Times. These small rituals gave structure to my days, made me feel competent and necessary. My fiancé, Derek, worked in sales at a tech startup downtown. We'd been together for 2 years, and he proposed on a rooftop in Lincoln Park with a ring that probably cost him 3 months' salary. The diamond caught the sunset, throwing rainbow prisms across my face as he knelt down. "Sarah Foster," he'd said, his voice breaking with emotion. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Will you marry me?" I'd said yes without hesitation. How could I not? He was handsome, successful, attentive. He sent flowers to my office. He remembered the names of my college roommates. He made me feel special, chosen, like I'd won some cosmic lottery. His mother, Patricia, had money, though. Old money from some manufacturing fortune that Derek never talked about much. She lived in a 17-room mansion in Winnetka with a staff of 5 and a wine cellar that cost more than most people's houses. The first time Derek took me to meet her, I spent 20 minutes in the circular driveway trying to calm my nerves. She made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her baby boy. The first crack appeared at our engagement party at Patricia's sprawling estate in Winnetka. The party was elaborate, over the top really, with an ice sculpture in the shape of a swan and past hors d'oeuvres that looked too beautiful to eat. I wore a navy dress from Nordstrom Rack, not realizing until I arrived that everyone else was in designer labels I couldn't even pronounce. I overheard Patricia in the powder room telling one of her society friends that Derek was marrying down and that she'd already spoken to her lawyer about protecting Derek's inheritance. I stood there in the hallway, my hand frozen on the doorknob, feeling something cold settle in my chest. The powder room door was slightly ajar, and I could see Patricia's reflection in the hallway mirror. She was reapplying lipstick, her movements precise and practiced. "The girl has no pedigree," Patricia said, her voice dripping with disdain. "No family money, no connections. She's pretty enough, I suppose, but Derek could do so much better. I've already instructed Gerald to draw up an ironclad prenup. We need to protect Derek's assets from this little opportunist." Her friend, a woman whose neck dripped with diamonds, made a sympathetic noise. How unfortunate, but surely Derek sees through her. "Derek is blinded by infatuation," Patricia replied. "He always has been susceptible to a pretty face. Remember that waitress he dated in college? At least I managed to end that disaster before it went too far." When I confronted Derek later that night, after the guests had left and we were alone in his car, he kissed my forehead and told me I was being paranoid. "Mom's just protective," he said, his hand squeezing my knee in what was probably meant to be a reassuring gesture. "She was the same way with my brother when he got engaged. She'll come around once she gets to know you better. Derek, she called me an opportunist. She said I have no pedigree. He laughed, actually laughed. That's just how her generation talks. It doesn't mean anything. You're being too sensitive. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly, so I swallowed my hurt and my anger and told myself he was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe this was just what it meant to marry into a wealthy family. I threw myself into wedding planning with the kind of manic energy that should have been a warning sign. I made lists upon lists. I researched florists and caterers and photographers until my eyes burned from staring at my laptop screen. I created elaborate Pinterest boards and color-coded spreadsheets. If I could just plan the perfect wedding, I thought, Patricia would see that I was worthy of her son. Patricia insisted on controlling every detail, from the guest list to the flowers to the menu. She scheduled meetings at her house, elaborate affairs where we'd sit in her formal dining room surrounded by oil paintings of dead Hendersons, while she made decisions without my input. "I'm paying for it, dear," she'd remind me whenever I tried to suggest something. And the Hendersons have certain standards. Derek's last name was Henderson, mine was Foster. I was learning that in Patricia's world, that distinction mattered more than I could have imagined. I wanted peonies for the centerpieces because they were my mother's favorite flower. Patricia insisted on orchids flown in from Thailand. I wanted a jazz trio for the reception. Patricia hired a full orchestra that had played at some European royal wedding. I wanted to invite my college friends. Patricia said we needed to make room for her business associates, and suddenly my guest list was cut to 20 people while hers ballooned to over 100. "We need to maintain appearances," she said when I protested. "The Henderson wedding is a social event. People expect certain things." Mr. Caldwell noticed the stress. He always noticed things like that. One afternoon about 6 weeks before the wedding, I was crying in the supply room over a seating chart Patricia had completely redone without consulting me. She'd relegated my family to tables in the back, near the kitchen, while her friends got the prime spots near the dance floor. Mr. Caldwell walked in looking for printer paper and found me sobbing over a crumpled spreadsheet. "Sarah," he said gently, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Is everything all right?" I wiped my eyes, embarrassed to be caught like this. Mr. Caldwell and I had a good working relationship, but it was professional. I didn't cry in front of him. I didn't let him see me vulnerable. "Just wedding jitters," I lied, trying to smooth out the wrinkled seating chart. "Everything's fine." He was quiet for a moment, and when I looked up, his expression was thoughtful, almost sad. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've known you for 3 years. I've seen you handle crisis after crisis with grace and competence. I've seen you negotiate with hostile board members and manage impossible schedules without breaking a sweat. But in the last few months, you've seemed diminished somehow." The word hit me like a slap. Diminished. Was that what was happening? Was I becoming smaller? "In my experience," he continued carefully, "if planning the wedding is this hard, imagine what the marriage will be." I should have listened to him. I should have heard what he was really saying, but instead I got defensive. "You don't understand," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "This is just how it is with wealthy families. There are expectations, traditions. I'm learning to navigate them." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing whether to push further or let it go. "All right," he said finally. "But Sarah, if you ever need anything at all, I hope you know you can come to me." But I ignored him. I ignored a lot of things in those months, like the fact that Derek spent more time with his mother than with me. Sunday brunches at Patricia's house became mandatory. Wednesday dinners too, then Friday cocktail hours. Before I knew it, I was seeing Patricia more than my own friends, or that he'd started making comments about my job, suggesting maybe I should quit after we got married. It started subtly. We'd be having dinner at his apartment, and he'd ask about my day. I'd tell him about some project I was working on, some success I'd had, and he'd smile and nod and then say something like, "Sounds stressful. You won't have to deal with that for much longer." "What do you mean?" I asked the first time. "Well, after we're married, you can quit. I make enough for both of us. You won't need to work." "I like my job," I said, confused. "I'm good at it. Mr. Caldwell just promoted me to senior executive assistant." Derek's expression clouded. "Right, Mr. Caldwell. You know, Sarah, it makes me uncomfortable how much time you spend with him. He's my boss. We work together. He's a single man, a wealthy single man. People might get the wrong idea." I laughed, genuinely amused. Mr. Caldwell is old enough to be my father, and he's never been anything but professional. "Still," Derek said, and there was an edge to his voice I hadn't heard before, "I'll take care of you. A Henderson wife doesn't need to be employed." There it was again. Henderson wife. As if marrying Derek meant I stopped being Sarah Foster and became some interchangeable component of his family machine. Patricia was even more direct. One afternoon, she called me to her house for what she said was an important discussion about the wedding. When I arrived, she sat me down in her study, a room lined with leather-bound books that I suspected she'd never actually read. "Sarah, dear, we need to discuss your employment situation." "My what?" "Your job. It's simply not appropriate for a Henderson wife to be working as someone's secretary. I'm an executive assistant, not a secretary, and I have no intention of quitting." Patricia's smile was patient, the way you'd smile at a child who doesn't understand basic math. "Derek will be taking over a significant portion of the family business after the wedding. He'll need a wife who can support him socially, who can host dinners and attend fundraisers. You won't have time for outside employment. Maybe Derek and I should discuss what I will and won't have time for. I've already discussed it with him. He agrees with me." My stomach dropped. "He what?" "He agrees that you should quit your job after the wedding." "Really, Sarah? Did you think you could work for another man after becoming Derek's wife? It looks terribly inappropriate." I left that meeting shaking with anger and confusion. When I confronted Derek that night, he sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Mom has a point," he said. "It would be easier if you didn't work. We'll be busy with social obligations. You told your mother you wanted me to quit my job before discussing it with me?" "I didn't tell her that. We were just talking about possibilities." "She said you agreed with her." "You're twisting my words. This is why I don't like talking to you when you're emotional." It was like watching my own life slip through my fingers, and I kept telling myself I was being dramatic, that all brides felt this way, that marriage meant compromise. But this didn't feel like compromise. This felt like surrender. The scariest part was how I started doubting my own memory. Derek would promise to come home for dinner, and I'd spend hours cooking his favorite meal, a complicated pasta dish with homemade sauce. Then he'd show up at midnight smelling like his mother's expensive perfume, that distinctive Chanel No. 5 that lingered in every room of her house, and tell me we never made plans. "You're confused, babe," he'd say, looking at me with what might have been genuine concern or might have been manipulation. I couldn't tell anymore. "I told you I had that thing with Mom tonight. The business dinner, remember?" Had he? I'd pull up our text messages and find nothing. Wonder if I'd imagined the whole conversation. Had we talked on the phone? Had I dreamed it? I started second-guessing everything, keeping notes on my phone about our plans, just so I could prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. Patricia was worse. She'd tell me the caterer confirmed a menu change, then when I'd arrive at the tasting, the caterer would have no record of it. She'd say she'd ordered specific flowers, then the florist would contradict her. And every time, Patricia would look at me with this concerned expression, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together in artificial worry. "Sarah, are you feeling all right? You seem forgetful lately. Derek mentioned you've been under a lot of stress." The implication was clear. I was the problem. I was the one who couldn't keep things straight. Not her. Never her. I stopped eating properly. Who had time? Between my demanding job, where I still had to perform at a high level even though I was falling apart inside, and trying to plan a wedding that Patricia kept changing, food became optional. I'd skip breakfast because I was running late. I'd skip lunch because I was on the phone with vendors Patricia had already called with contradictory instructions. I'd skip dinner because Derek canceled our plans again. I dropped 15 pounds in 2 months. My clothes hung off me. My face looked gaunt, cheekbones too sharp, eyes too big. People at work started asking if I was sick. I told them I was fine, that I was just busy with wedding planning. Haha, you know how it is. Mr. Caldwell noticed. Of course he noticed. One morning I stood up too fast from my desk, and the world tilted. I grabbed the edge of my desk, breathing hard, black spots dancing in my vision. "Sarah, you need to take care of yourself," he said, appearing at my elbow and gently guiding me to a chair in the break room. He got me a glass of water and a granola bar from the vending machine. "When's the last time you ate?" I tried to remember. "I had coffee this morning." "That's not food. Sarah, you're working yourself to death. This wedding planning is clearly taking a toll." I waved him off, said I was fine, that I'd eat lunch. I didn't eat lunch. I had more coffee and kept working. Because that's what you do when you're trying to prove you're good enough to marry into a family that will never accept you. If I just worked harder, if I just made myself more perfect, maybe Patricia would see my worth. Maybe Derek would stand up for me. Maybe I'd finally feel like I belonged. The breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was at the community center where I volunteered on weekends, teaching financial literacy to seniors. It was the one place I felt competent, the one corner of my life Patricia hadn't invaded. The seniors loved me. They brought me homemade cookies and told me I was doing important work. For 2 hours every Saturday, I remembered who I used to be. Mrs. Chen, the director, pulled me aside after class. She was a small woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Sarah, we need to talk about your mother-in-law's donation." My stomach dropped. The sensation was immediate and visceral, like stepping into an elevator that's dropping too fast. "What donation?" Mrs. Chen looked confused, her expression shifting to concern. "The $100,000 donation she made in your name. She said it was a wedding gift to the community. She came by last week with her lawyers and everything. But there are some concerning conditions attached." The world tilted again, but this time it wasn't from lack of food. "What kind of conditions?" "Well, for one thing, the money comes with the requirement that we restructure our board. She wants 3 seats with veto power over our programming decisions. And she wants to change the focus of your financial literacy class to emphasize traditional family values, whatever that means." I stood there in the hallway of that community center, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, feeling the world tilt. The walls were covered with drawings from the children's art program, bright crayon pictures of families and houses and sunshine. Everything looked suddenly surreal, like a painting that was melting. Patricia had donated money in my name without telling me and attached conditions that basically gave her control over the center's programming. She was using my volunteer work as some kind of chess piece in a game I didn't even know I was playing. "Mrs. Chen, I had no idea about any of this. I never authorized this donation." She said it was a surprise, a way to honor your commitment to community service. "It's not a gift if it comes with strings that destroy everything we've built here." I looked at my reflection in the glass door leading outside. I barely recognized myself. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. My face looked gaunt, my collarbones jutting out sharply against the neckline of my sweater. My eyes had this hollow quality, like I'd checked out of my own life. When did that happen? When did I become this person? This ghost wearing my clothes and answering to my name, but fundamentally absent from her own existence? I thought back to the woman I was 3 months ago. She laughed easily. She had opinions about things that mattered. She stood up for herself. She had boundaries. Where did that woman go? When exactly did I trade her in for this anxious, people-pleasing version who second-guessed every thought and apologized for existing? I remembered a conversation with my best friend Rachel, back before I drifted away from her. We'd been having brunch at our favorite spot in Wicker Park, And I'd mentioned something Patricia said about my clothes not being appropriate for Henderson family events. "Sarah, why do you care what this woman thinks?" Rachel had asked, her mimosa halfway to her lips. "You've never let anyone tell you how to dress. Remember when your college advisor said you needed to look more feminine to get hired? You showed up to your next meeting in a power suit and heels and told her competence doesn't have a dress code." I'd laughed it off then, told Rachel she didn't understand what it was like to marry into wealth, that Patricia came from a different generation with different expectations, that it wasn't worth fighting over. But Rachel had put down her mimosa and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, listen to yourself. You're making excuses for someone who's trying to change you. That's not love. That's control." I'd gotten defensive, told her she was being dramatic, made excuses to leave early. That was 2 months ago. We hadn't had brunch since. She'd texted a few times, but I'd been too busy, too stressed, too consumed by wedding planning to respond properly. Standing there in the community center hallway, looking at my hollow-eyed reflection, I realized Rachel was right. I'd been making excuses for people who were systematically dismantling my sense of self, and I'd pushed away the friend who tried to warn me. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I sat in my apartment, my laptop open on my thighs, and Googled financial abuse. What I found made my blood run cold. The first article that came up was from a domestic violence prevention site. It listed warning signs: limiting access to money or credit cards, controlling how money is spent, demanding receipts, giving an allowance, forbidding work outside the home, stealing money, refusing to work, but criticizing the partner's financial contribution. I kept reading. Another article mentioned a case where a caregiver had stolen $35,300 from a 94-year-old woman in just 7 months. Financial exploitation, coercive control, isolation from support systems. I read the warning signs and saw my own life reflected back at me. Derek controlling my schedule, Patricia inserting herself into every decision, the subtle suggestions that I quit my job, become financially dependent, the credit card I didn't know about, the donation I didn't authorize. Holy God, I thought, I'm being groomed. The next morning, Mr. Caldwell called me into his office. The sun was streaming through those floor-to-ceiling windows, making Lake Michigan sparkle like diamonds. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt ominous. "Close the door, Sarah." His expression was serious in a way I'd never seen. In 3 years of working together, I'd seen him negotiate million-dollar deals, fire executives, handle PR crises. But I'd never seen him look scared until that moment. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm overstepping, but I can't stay silent anymore." He explained that his ex-wife had gone through something similar with her own family, a wealthy clan who'd tried to control every aspect of their marriage. They'd isolated her from friends, controlled her spending, made her doubt her own perceptions, pressured her to quit her job. "It destroyed us," he said, his voice heavy with regret. By the time she found the courage to leave them, she'd also left me. The marriage couldn't survive what they'd done to it. And Sarah, I see the same patterns with you and Derek. I wanted to defend Derek, to say it wasn't like that, but the words died in my throat, because it was exactly like that. I just hadn't wanted to see it. "Yesterday, I received a very interesting phone call," Mr. Caldwell continued, "from Patricia Henderson's lawyer. They wanted to know about your employment contract with Caldwell Industries. Specifically, they wanted to know if there were any clauses that would prevent you from quitting." Why would they want to know that? Because they're planning to make you quit, Sarah, and they wanted to make sure there wouldn't be legal repercussions. The implications crashed over me like a wave. They were planning my life without me, making decisions about my career, my future, my autonomy, as if I was a chess piece to be moved around their board. Mr. Caldwell offered to help. "Whatever you need," he said. "Legal resources, financial advice, a place to stay if it comes to that." I'm serious, Sarah. I failed my wife. I saw what was happening and I didn't act fast enough. I won't make that mistake again. I looked at this man, my boss, who barely knew me outside of work, offering me a lifeline I didn't even realize I needed. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this for me?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the lake, at the sailboats dotting the water. "Because someone should have done this for my ex-wife. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe she'd have been able to escape her family's influence before it poisoned everything. And maybe, just maybe, we'd still be married." That conversation changed everything. I started documenting things. Every conversation with Patricia and Derek. Every financial decision they made without consulting me. Every time Derek told me I was remembering wrong, I'd note the actual conversation in a private document I kept in a cloud account he didn't know about. The way Patricia had opened a credit card in my name without permission, allegedly to help with wedding expenses, went into the file. I pulled my credit report and found 3 cards I didn't know about, all with significant balances, all in my name. I consulted with a lawyer Mr. Caldwell recommended, a sharp woman in her 50s named Margaret Chen, who specialized in financial exploitation cases. Her office was small but immaculate, filled with file cabinets and law books. She took one look at my file and said, "You need to get out now." "But the wedding is in 3 weeks. All those deposits are paid. All those guests are coming." Margaret leaned across her desk, her expression fierce. "Sarah, listen to me. In 20 years of practicing law, I've seen this exact pattern dozens of times. It always escalates after the wedding. Right now, you still have options. You're still financially independent. You still have your job. Once you're legally married to Derek, especially if you quit your job like they're pressuring you to do, you become exponentially more vulnerable." But I didn't get out. Not then. I was 3 weeks from my wedding. All those deposits paid. All those guests coming. All that pressure. The weight of expectations and embarrassment and the sunk cost fallacy. I told myself I could fix it. I could make Derek see what his mother was doing. We could set boundaries. People do that all the time, right? Set boundaries with toxic in-laws. We could go to couples counseling. We could move across the country, away from Patricia's influence. We could make this work if we just tried hard enough. I confronted Derek 2 weeks before the wedding. We were in his apartment, the one his mother had bought for him in River North. It was a beautiful space, all exposed brick and hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. But suddenly it felt like a cage. I laid it all out. The credit cards I never opened, the donation in my name with strings attached, the way Patricia undermined me at every turn, the pressure to quit my job, the gaslighting, the control. Derek listened with this blank expression, his face utterly neutral, and when I finished, he said, "You're being hysterical. Mom's just trying to help." Hysterical. That word hung in the air between us like a grenade. "Derek, she opened a credit card in my name. That's identity theft. That's illegal. She was trying to help with wedding costs. You were stressed about money, without asking me, without my permission, without even telling me. She didn't want to burden you. It's not a burden to be consulted about my own finances." My voice was rising now, frustration and fear making me loud. Derek winced like I was hurting him. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said. "You're being emotional. You're being irrational. We can't have a conversation when you're like this." I felt like I was arguing with a wall, and the scariest part was how much I wanted to believe him. How a part of me was actually wondering if maybe I was being hysterical. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was all normal, and I was the problem. Mr. Caldwell found me crying in the parking garage the next day. I'd stayed late, couldn't face going home to my empty apartment and the half-packed boxes for the move I was suddenly not sure I wanted to make. I was sitting in my car in the dim fluorescent lighting, mascara streaming down my face, when his BMW pulled up next to me. He sat with me in his car, this ridiculous luxury vehicle that cost more than I made in 2 years, with its leather seats and its wood trim and its absolute silence. And he listened to me fall apart. I told him everything. About the confrontation with Derek, about the credit cards, about feeling like I was losing my mind, about being so scared, but also not wanting to give up on the relationship I'd invested 2 years of my life in. "Sarah," he said finally, "I'm going to make you an offer. Come to your wedding rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. If you still want to marry Derek after that, I'll support your decision. I'll even walk you down the aisle if you want, since your father can't be there. But I want you to see something first." I didn't understand what he meant, but I agreed. What else was I going to do? At this point, I was barely holding it together. I was going through the motions of wedding preparation while simultaneously watching my whole life crumble. The rehearsal dinner was at the country club, in the same ballroom where the wedding reception would be held. 200 people Patricia insisted we needed to invite, even though traditional rehearsal dinners are supposed to be small, intimate affairs for close family and the wedding party. But nothing about this wedding was traditional. Nothing about it was mine. I wore a cream dress I'd bought on sale at Macy's, knowing it wouldn't be good enough, but unable to afford the designer gown Patricia had picked out. She'd sent me a link to a Marchesa dress that cost $6,000, with a note saying, "This is what a Henderson bride wears to her rehearsal dinner." I couldn't spend $6,000 on a dress I'd wear for 3 hours. I couldn't even comprehend having that kind of money for clothes. So I wore my $200 Macy's dress and felt Patricia's disapproval the moment I walked in. Derek barely spoke to me all night. He was too busy working the room, playing the role of Patricia's perfect son. Shaking hands with her business associates, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, being charming and attentive to everyone except me. I watched him from across the ballroom and thought, I don't even know this person. The man who proposed to me on that rooftop, the man who cried when he talked about our future. Where did he go? Or was that version of Derek ever real? Was he always this person, and I just didn't want to see it? Mr. Caldwell showed up late, which surprised me since he wasn't supposed to be there at all. He'd been invited to the wedding, but not the rehearsal dinner. Patricia had made it very clear that the rehearsal dinner was for family and intimate friends only. And despite 3 years of working closely together, Mr. Caldwell apparently didn't qualify. But there he was, walking into the country club in an impeccably tailored suit, looking every inch the successful CEO. He walked straight to Patricia, who was holding court near the bar, surrounded by her society friends. I couldn't hear what he said to her, but I watched her face go white, watched her grip on her champagne glass tighten until I thought the stem might snap. Then he turned to the microphone. The DJ tried to stop him, looking confused and a little panicked, but Mr. Caldwell had this way of commanding a room that came from decades of running board meetings and negotiating deals. He simply looked at the DJ, and the man stepped aside. "If I could have everyone's attention," Mr. Caldwell said, his voice carrying across the room with the kind of authority that made people automatically stop talking and listen. The conversations died in waves, starting near the microphone and rippling outward until the entire ballroom was silent. 200 people turning to look at this man who wasn't supposed to be here. Patricia was frantically signaling someone, maybe the club manager, to cut the sound, but Mr. Caldwell kept talking. "I'm Richard Caldwell, Sarah Foster's employer and friend. I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I'm here tonight because I learned something disturbing, and I believe Sarah has a right to know before she makes the biggest decision of her life." My heart stopped. What was he doing? Around me, I could feel the curiosity, the excitement of scandal rippling through the crowd. This was going to be the story they told at dinner parties for years. This was going to be legendary gossip. Derek was pushing through the crowd toward the microphone, his face red with anger or embarrassment or both. Mr. Caldwell held up a folder. "This is a prenuptial agreement drafted by Patricia Henderson's lawyers, an agreement Sarah never saw. An agreement that would have given the Henderson family complete control over any assets Sarah brought to the marriage, including her salary, her inheritance, everything." The room erupted. Gasps and whispers and shocked exclamations bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and the elaborate floral arrangements. Patricia was screaming that he had no right, her voice shrill and desperate. Derek was trying to grab the folder, his movements jerky and aggressive, and I just stood there, frozen, as Mr. Caldwell kept talking. Furthermore, there's a clause that requires Sarah to quit her job within 6 months of marriage and sign over power of attorney to her mother-in-law for all financial decisions. My legs gave out. Someone caught me, I don't know who. Maybe one of the waiters circulating with champagne. Maybe one of the few people in that room who actually cared about me. Mr. Caldwell was still talking, his voice steady and calm despite the chaos erupting around him. He explained how he discovered the document through his own lawyers when Patricia tried to donate to the community center in my name. How he'd investigated and found a pattern of financial abuse Patricia had inflicted on other family members. How Derek's first fiancée had broken off their engagement under mysterious circumstances, and when Mr. Caldwell tracked her down, she told a story eerily similar to mine. Patricia grabbed the microphone, wrenching it out of Mr. Caldwell's hand with surprising strength. That's when she said it. "Well, I suppose we should all know the truth about the little gold digger my son married." The champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the marble floor. I watched the expensive champagne pool around her designer heels, watched the crystal shards glitter under the chandelier light, and something in me just broke. Not in a sad way, in a clean, sharp way, like cutting through rope that's been binding you for so long you forgot what it felt like to move freely. "I'm not married to him yet," I said, and I was surprised at how steady my voice was, how it carried in the sudden silence that followed Patricia's accusation. "And I'm not going to be." I turned to Derek, who was standing there looking shell-shocked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Your mother opened credit cards in my name. She made donations in my name. She tried to control every aspect of my life. And you let her. You not only let her, you helped her. You gaslit me. You made me doubt my own memory and my own worth. You tried to convince me to give up my job, my independence, my autonomy. And for what? So I could become another one of her puppets?" My voice was rising now, all the anger and hurt and frustration of the past months pouring out. "I loved you, I really did, but you don't love me. You love the idea of a wife who'll do whatever you and your mother tell her to do. And I'm not that person. I will never be that person." I pulled the engagement ring off my finger. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with all the promises that had turned out to be lies. I held it out to Derek. "Take it. Take all of it. The wedding, the marriage, the life you and Patricia planned without my input. I'm done." The lawsuit came 3 weeks later. Mr. Caldwell's lawyers handled everything, a team of sharp professionals who worked with the kind of quiet efficiency that spoke of experience with exactly these kinds of cases. I sued Patricia for financial fraud, identity theft, and attempted coercive control. The case made the newspapers. Chicago socialite accused of elder abuse, tactics against son's fiancée. The Chicago Tribune ran it on page 3. Social media exploded with it. Patricia Henderson was trending for 2 days. Turns out Patricia had pulled this routine before with Derek's first fiancée, who'd been too scared to fight back. The woman reached out to me after seeing the news coverage, and we met for coffee at a shop in Lakeview. Her name was Amanda, and she looked like she'd been through a war. Even 3 years after her escape, she still had this haunted look in her eyes. "She did the same thing to me," Amanda said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she needed the warmth. "The credit cards, the control, the gaslighting, but I didn't have anyone like your Mr. Caldwell. I didn't have anyone who believed me, so I just ran. Broke off the engagement 2 days before the wedding and moved to California. I was so ashamed. I thought it was my fault. We weren't the only ones. There were others, women who'd almost married into the Henderson family and escaped just in time. A woman named Jennifer, who'd been engaged to Derek's cousin. A woman named Lisa, who dated Derek's brother. All of them had stories that were variations on the same horrifying theme. Patricia had been doing this for decades, using wealth and social position as weapons to control and diminish any woman who threatened her hold on the men in her family. Derek tried to call me once, about a week after the rehearsal dinner. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was slurred, like he'd been drinking. "Sarah, please. I didn't know about the prenup. I swear I didn't know. Mom handled all of that. She said it was standard procedure for wealthy families. I love you. I really love you. Can we talk? Please?" I deleted the message. Love doesn't look like that. Love doesn't make you smaller. Love doesn't make you doubt your own reality. Whatever Derek felt for me, it wasn't love. At best, it was affection. At worst, it was ownership. The trial was brutal. It lasted 3 weeks, and every day felt like an endurance test. Patricia's lawyers tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, seduced by her wealthy boss, a gold digger who'd manufactured this whole scenario when she realized she wouldn't get access to the Henderson fortune. They put me on the stand and grilled me for 6 hours about my relationship with Mr. Caldwell. Wasn't it true that he'd given me gifts? A Christmas bonus, same as all senior employees. Wasn't it true that we spent long hours alone together? Yes, that's how jobs work. Wasn't it true that I had romantic feelings for him and concocted this scheme when Derek chose his mother over me? No, I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage burning in my chest. Mr. Caldwell is a colleague and a friend. He helped me because what Patricia Henderson did was illegal and wrong, and he had the resources to fight back. That's not romance. That's human decency. Mr. Caldwell took the stand and calmly explained that he was gay, had been in a committed relationship with his partner Marcus for the past 5 years, and had zero romantic interest in me or any woman. He'd helped because it was the right thing to do. "I watched my ex-wife suffer under her family's financial abuse," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I didn't help her the way I should have. I didn't fight for her. I'm not making that mistake again. Sarah Foster deserved to know the truth about what Patricia Henderson was doing, and she deserved support in fighting back." The jury took 4 hours to find in my favor. When the foreman read the verdict, I felt something crack open inside me. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door I'd kept locked for so long I'd forgotten what was behind it. Patricia was ordered to pay restitution, not just to me, but to the community center she'd manipulated. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who reminded me of Mrs. Chen, looked directly at Patricia when she delivered the sentence. "Mrs. Henderson, you have used your wealth and social position as weapons. You have exploited young women, manipulated charitable organizations, and committed fraud. Your actions have caused measurable harm to multiple victims. The court finds your behavior reprehensible and orders you to pay $300,000 in restitution, split between Sarah Foster and the Community Literacy Center. Additionally, you will fund a financial abuse prevention program to be administered by Ms. Foster's employer." The judge also ordered Patricia to pay for financial counseling for the other women who came forward with similar stories. Amanda, Jennifer, Lisa, and 3 others whose names I'd learned during the trial. 7 women total. 7 lives Patricia had tried to control and diminish. In the courtroom, watching Patricia's face as the verdict was read, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, relieved, but tired. This woman had stolen months of my life. She'd made me doubt my own mind. She'd weaponized love and family against me. And for what? Control? Power? The sick satisfaction of knowing she could manipulate anyone who got close to her son? Derek wasn't charged criminally, but the court found him civilly liable for negligence in my case. He knew about the credit cards, the judge determined. He might not have read the prenup, but he'd signed off on it. He'd participated in the gaslighting, even if he'd convinced himself he was just supporting his mother. The judge ordered him to attend mandatory therapy and anger management classes. But the real punishment came from the business world. Henderson Manufacturing lost 3 major contracts when the story broke. Turns out, investors don't love CEOs whose mothers are convicted fraudsters. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and decided Derek needed to step down as VP. I learned all this from the business section of the Tribune. I wasn't tracking Derek anymore. I wasn't following his life or wondering about him. But the story was big enough that it found me anyway. Last I heard from a mutual acquaintance, he and Patricia moved to Arizona, trying to start fresh where nobody knows the story. Scottsdale, apparently. A gated community where Patricia could rebuild her social standing among people who didn't Google her name before accepting dinner invitations. I hope Derek found the courage to separate from his mother. I hope Arizona gave him the distance he needed to do the work of becoming his own person. But I don't wonder about it much anymore. That part of my life is closed, and I've learned not to pick at closed wounds. I hope Patricia learned something from losing in court, though I doubt it. People like her rarely do. They're too invested in their own narratives, too convinced of their righteousness. But that's not my problem anymore. My problem is helping the next woman who walks into my office with that same hollow look I had. Because after the trial, I made a change. Mr. Caldwell offered me a promotion, Senior Vice President of Operations, with a salary that would have made my 28-year-old self weep with joy. We were in his office, the same office where he'd first offered to help me, and he slid the offer letter across his desk. "You've been through hell, Sarah. You deserve this. You've earned it. And frankly, you've always been overqualified for your current position. I should have promoted you years ago." I looked at the salary figure. 6 figures, stock options, a corner office of my own, benefits that would make my parents cry with relief. Everything I'd worked for since graduating college. "I can't accept this," I said. Mr. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Can I ask why?" "Because I need to do something different. I need to take what happened to me and make it mean something. There are women out there right now going through what I went through, and they don't have someone like you to help them. They don't have resources or lawyers or a boss who cares. They're alone. And I can't just go back to business as usual, knowing that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. I have a proposition for you." That's how I ended up at the Chicago Alliance Against Financial Abuse, a nonprofit that Mr. Caldwell's foundation had been quietly supporting for years. He'd made some calls, pulled some strings, and created a position for me, Director of Survivor Services and Education. I turned it down, not because I didn't want it, but because I wasn't qualified to be a director. I'd been a victim of financial abuse for all of 3 months. I'd survived 1 trial. That didn't make me an expert. "Start as a counselor then," Mr. Caldwell said. "Learn the work from the ground up. When you're ready, the director position will be waiting." So that's what I did. I took a job at a nonprofit that helps women escape financial abuse. The pay was half what I made as Mr. Caldwell's assistant, a fraction of what the VP position would have paid. But the work meant something. I spend my days teaching women to recognize the signs I missed, how to protect their assets, how to document abuse, how to rebuild when they finally get out. My first client was a woman named Maria. She was 42, married for 15 years, with 2 kids in middle school. Her husband controlled every penny. She had to show him receipts for groceries. He'd given her an allowance of $50 a week for personal expenses. And if she went over, he'd lecture her about financial responsibility while he bought himself a new golf club or went out drinking with his friends. She sat in my office, in the small counseling room with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and she said, "I feel crazy. Everyone tells me I'm lucky. He makes good money. He doesn't hit me. Our kids have everything they need, but I feel like I'm drowning." "You're not crazy," I told her. "What you're describing is financial abuse. It's a form of coercive control, and it's just as damaging as physical abuse." She cried. She cried for an hour while I sat with her and let her know that her feelings were valid, that her experience mattered, that she wasn't alone. We worked together for 3 months. I helped her open a secret bank account. taught her how to document her husband's controlling behavior, connected her with a lawyer who specialized in financial abuse cases, helped her create a safety plan for when she was ready to leave. The day she left him, she called me from her sister's house. "I did it," she said, her voice shaking. "I packed up the kids and I left. I'm terrified, but I did it." "You're so brave," I told her, and I meant it. That's what I do now. I sit with women who are where I was, and I tell them they're not crazy. I teach them the warning signs. I help them plan their escape. I celebrate with them when they're free. Patricia's trial became a case study we use in training. An example of how financial abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of age or education or income. I teach workshops using my own story, and every time I tell it, I see women in the audience having that same realization I had in the community center hallway. That moment when they finally see what's been happening to them. I learned later that injuries from elder abuse cost American hospitals $5.3 billion per year. $5.3 billion. Patricia's donation scheme could have bankrupted the community center, left the seniors we served without resources. I was 28, not elderly, but the pattern was the same. Exploitation, control, isolation. Financial abuse doesn't discriminate by age. It targets vulnerability. I was vulnerable because I wanted to belong to Derek's world so badly I was willing to ignore every warning sign. I ran into Derek 6 months after the wedding that never happened. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was in a coffee shop in Wicker Park, meeting with a client. Maria, actually. We were celebrating 6 months of her being free from her abusive husband, and she'd insisted on buying me a coffee to say thank you. Derek walked in looking smaller somehow, less sure of himself. The confident man I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by someone who looked lost. He was wearing jeans and a plain sweater. Nothing designer, nothing that screamed Henderson wealth. His hair was longer, unkempt. He had circles under his eyes. He saw me and froze. I watched him consider leaving, watched him square his shoulders and walk over to my table. Maria noticed the change in my expression. "You okay?" she whispered. "That's my ex-fiancé," I said quietly. "The one from the trial." Her eyes widened. "Do you want me to stay?" I considered it. Having a witness might be smart, but Maria had enough to deal with without getting pulled into my drama. "No, it's okay. I'll text you later." She squeezed my hand, gathered her things, and left. Derek stood there, waiting for permission to approach. "Sarah, can we talk?" "No. Please. 5 minutes." I looked at him for a long moment. The man I'd almost married. The man I'd almost destroyed my life for. He looked so different from the polished, confident Derek who'd proposed on that rooftop. This Derek looked human. Broken, maybe, but human. "You have 2 minutes." He sat down, his movements awkward, like he wasn't sure he was welcome. He probably wasn't. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything, for what my mother did, for not protecting you, for not seeing what was happening, for being complicit in it. Did you know about the prenup?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew there was a prenup. I didn't read it. Mom said her lawyers handled it, and it was all standard stuff, just protecting the family assets. I should have read it. I should have shown it to you. I should have questioned why she was so insistent on handling it herself." "Why didn't you?" "Because it was easier not to. Because questioning my mother meant choosing you over her. And I'd never done that before. I'd never chosen anyone over her. And I told myself it was fine, that you'd understand, that you were marrying into the family, and families have certain ways of doing things." He rubbed his face with both hands, and I noticed he wasn't wearing his expensive watch anymore. "I've been in therapy," he continued, 3 times a week. "My therapist says I have codependency issues with my mother, that she used emotional incest tactics to keep me under her control, that I might not ever have a healthy relationship with a woman until I establish firm boundaries with her." "Do you hate me?" he asked finally, his voice breaking. I told him the truth. "I don't hate you. I pity you. You're 32 years old and still living in your mother's shadow. And until you do the hard work of separating yourself from her, you'll never have a real relationship with anyone. You'll just keep repeating this pattern with woman after woman. He started crying, actual tears running down his face in the middle of this coffee shop. People were starting to stare. "I moved out," he said through tears. "I'm living in a studio apartment in Scottsdale. I got a job at a regular company, not the family business. I haven't spoken to my mother in 3 months. I'm trying, Sarah. I'm really trying to be better." I felt something soften in my chest, just a little. This was what healing looked like, messy and painful and incomplete. "I'm glad you're getting help, Derek." "I really am. But I can't be part of your healing journey. I have my own work to do." I stood up, gathered my things. "If you're serious about changing," I said, "keep going to therapy. Do the work even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And maybe someday you'll be able to have a relationship that's actually healthy. But it won't be with me." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I know. I just wanted you to know that you were right, about everything, and that what you did, calling off the wedding and fighting back, it might have saved both our lives." I walked away. That wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. And maybe, just maybe, it was also closure. The scars are still there, even a year later. I flinch when someone offers to pay for dinner. I get anxious when I can't see my bank balance. I have trust issues that my therapist says are totally valid and will take years to work through. But I also have something I didn't have before. I have me back. The me who volunteered at the community center because it mattered, not because it looked good. The me who loved her job and was damn good at it. The me who knew her own worth and didn't need a man or his family's approval to validate it. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. Financial abuse in relationships is more common than most people realize. According to the National Network to End Domestic Violence, 99% of domestic violence cases involve some form of financial abuse. 99%. That means if you're being controlled in other ways, money is almost certainly part of it. Here's what I wish I'd known earlier. Financial abuse often starts subtly. It's a partner insisting on joint accounts but controlling the passwords. It's someone else paying your bills to help, but then holding it over you. It's being discouraged from working or pressured to quit your job. It's someone making large financial decisions in your name without consent. The warning signs I missed were textbook. Derek and Patricia isolated me from my support system by keeping me too busy to maintain friendships. They undermined my confidence by making me question my memory and perceptions. They created financial dependence by pressuring me to quit my job. Patricia specifically used charitable giving in my name to control how I was perceived in the community. If you're reading this and seeing yourself in my story, here's what you need to do. I'm going to give you the advice I wish someone had given me when I first noticed the red flags. First, document everything. Keep records of all financial transactions, emails, text messages, take screenshots, print out bank statements, record conversations if you're in a one-party consent state. Save them somewhere your partner can't access, maybe a cloud account they don't know about, or with a trusted friend. I use this strategy with my clients now. We create what I call a freedom file, a comprehensive record of the abuse that can be used in court if necessary. It includes financial documents, communication logs, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of controlling behaviors. This file has helped dozens of women prove their cases and win the financial settlements they deserve. Second, maintain your own bank account, even if you have joint accounts with your partner. Make sure you have money that's solely yours. If your partner insists on knowing about all your accounts, consider having a trusted friend or family member hold money for you. I know that sounds extreme, but financial abuse often escalates, and you need resources to escape if it comes to that. One of my clients, a woman I'll call Jennifer, opened a bank account in her maiden name at a different bank than her husband used. For 2 years, she deposited 10% of her grocery money into that account. By the time she left, She had $3,000, enough for first and last month's rent on an apartment and a retainer for a lawyer. That secret account saved her life. Third, know your credit score and check it regularly. Identity theft by intimate partners is shockingly common. I found 3 credit cards I didn't know about when I finally checked. You're entitled to 1 free credit report per year from each of the 3 major credit bureaus. Use annual credit report. Com to check yours. Look for accounts you didn't open, inquiries you didn't authorize, addresses you never lived at. If you find fraudulent accounts, freeze your credit immediately. File a police report for identity theft, even if the person who stole your identity is your partner. I know that's terrifying, but protecting yourself legally is essential. Fourth, stay employed if you possibly can. Financial independence is your greatest protection. If someone is pressuring you to quit your job, ask yourself why. What do they gain from your dependence? If you do leave your job, make sure it's genuinely your choice, not something you're being manipulated into. I've seen too many women quit their jobs because their partners convinced them it was the right move, only to find themselves trapped with no income and no way to leave. Employment isn't just about money. It's about maintaining skills, professional connections, and a sense of purpose outside your relationship. Fifth, maintain relationships outside your romantic partnership. Abusers isolate their victims because isolation makes control easier. Fight that with everything you have. Keep your friends, even when your partner makes it difficult. Keep your family, even if they don't understand your relationship. Keep your community connections, your volunteer work, your book club, your gym membership, whatever connects you to people outside your partner's influence. Rachel, my college friend who tried to warn me, sent me a text every week during my engagement, even when I stopped responding. Just checking in, thinking of you, hope you're okay. Those texts were a lifeline I didn't appreciate until later. When I finally left Derek, Rachel was one of the first people I called. I knew something was wrong, she told me. I just didn't know how to help you see it. Keep your people close. They might be the ones who save you when you can't save yourself. Sixth, consult with a lawyer who specializes in family law or financial abuse. Many offer free consultations. You need to understand your rights and options before you make major decisions like marriage. If someone pressures you not to see a lawyer, that's a massive red flag. People in healthy relationships don't fear legal clarity. Margaret Chen, the lawyer who helped me, offers 2 free consultations per month to women who suspect they're being financially abused. She's not the only one. Many lawyers do pro bono work for domestic abuse victims. Some bar associations have referral services specifically for this. You don't have to face this alone. Seventh, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I ignored so many warning signs because I wanted the fairy tale more than I wanted the truth. I wanted to believe Derek loved me more than I wanted to acknowledge he was controlling me. I wanted to believe Patricia would accept me more than I wanted to see she was systematically destroying my autonomy. Your instincts are trying to protect you. Listen to them. That uncomfortable feeling in your stomach when your partner checks your phone. That anxiety when you have to account for every purchase. That dread before family gatherings with his mother. Those aren't normal relationship stress. Those are your body telling you something is wrong. Here's the hardest lesson I learned. You cannot fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. Derek might have been a victim of his mother's manipulation too. But he was also an adult who made choices. He chose her version of reality over mine. He chose comfort over courage. That wasn't my responsibility to fix. Some people will say I should have tried harder to make Derek see the truth. Those people have never been gaslit by someone they love, while their future mother-in-law opened credit cards in their name. There's a point where trying harder becomes complicity in your own abuse. I reached that point when I saw my reflection in the community center window and didn't recognize myself. The recovery process isn't linear. Some days I'm angry, some days I'm sad. Some days I'm grateful it happened because I learned who I really was under all that performance. There are days when I'm doing fine, living my life, helping my clients, and then something will trigger me. A woman at the grocery store arguing with her husband about which brand of pasta to buy, and I'll see him belittle her choice, make her feel stupid for preferring one over the other. My heart starts racing, my palms get sweaty. I have to leave my cart and walk outside to breathe. Or I'll be on a date with Marcus and he'll offer to pick up the check, and even though I know intellectually that he's just being polite, that there's no control or manipulation behind it, my body reacts like there is. Fight or flight kicks in. My therapist calls it PTSD. I call it the ghost of Patricia Henderson haunting my nervous system. But there are also good days. Days when I help a client leave her abuser and I remember why I do this work. Days when I teach a workshop and see women having their moment of clarity, that flash of recognition where they finally understand what's been happening to them. Days when I look at my bank statement and feel grateful that every penny in that account is mine, earned by me, controlled by me. I learned I was strong enough to walk away from a wedding with 150 guests and a $10,000 dress already altered. That dress, by the way, I donated to a charity that provides formal wear to low-income women. Someone wore my wedding dress to her prom. I saw the photo on the charity's Facebook page. She looked beautiful, happy, free, everything I would not have been if I'd worn it. I learned I was brave enough to file a lawsuit against one of Chicago's wealthiest families, to stand up in court and tell my story, even when Patricia's lawyers tried to paint me as a liar and a gold digger. I learned that truth has power, even when it's your truth against someone with money and influence and a team of expensive attorneys. I learned I was resilient enough to rebuild my entire life from scratch, to make friends again after isolating myself during the engagement, to trust again after being gaslit and manipulated, to love again, carefully and slowly, with boundaries that would have seemed excessive to the old me, but feel essential now. Those lessons cost me. They cost me a relationship I thought was my future. They cost me months of my life spent in fear and confusion. They cost me my innocence, that naive belief that love conquers all and people who hurt you must not really love you. Sometimes people who love you hurt you anyway, especially if they love you wrong, love you selfishly, love you as an extension of themselves rather than as your own person. But the lessons were worth the price, because now I know what I'm worth. I know what I deserve. I know what healthy love looks like, and I know what abuse looks like even when it's dressed up as family tradition or concern or protection. I know that someone trying to control your money is trying to control your life. I know that someone who makes you doubt your own memory is gaslighting you. I know that someone who isolates you from your support system is an abuser, even if they never raise their voice or their hand. And I know that walking away, even when it's hard, even when everyone's watching, even when you've already sent the invitations and bought the dress, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. The community center still has my name on the literacy program, but now it's there because I earned it, not because Patricia bought it. The seniors I teach know my story. They call me brave. I call myself lucky. Lucky that Mr. Caldwell cared enough to intervene. Lucky that I listened before it was too late. Lucky that I'm here, whole, free, writing this instead of trapped in a marriage that would have destroyed me from the inside out. Do you know how many women don't get that luck? How many say yes even when everything in them is screaming no? I'm 29 now, single, living in a studio apartment in Logan Square that costs half my income, but it's mine. All mine. Nobody's name on the lease but mine. It's small, just 500 square feet, with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it has big windows that let in morning light, and a landlord who fixed the leaky faucet within 24 hours of me reporting it, and neighbors who smile at me in the hallway. I adopted a cat I named Freedom, because I'm exactly that corny about my new life. She's a tabby with green eyes and an attitude problem, and she sleeps on my chest every night. Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. with her purring on my sternum, and I think about how different my life could have been. How I could be in some mansion in Winnetka, sharing a bed with Derek, but sleeping alone in every way that matters, with Patricia controlling every aspect of my existence. Freedom the cat is a better companion than Derek ever was. At least she's honest about wanting to be fed. I go to therapy every week, Dr. Morrison is patient and kind, and she doesn't judge me when I have setbacks. When I panic about money, or when I can't bring myself to trust someone who's trying to help. She reminds me that healing isn't linear, that trauma rewires your brain, that it's okay to still be angry at Patricia and Derek even though the trial ended a year ago. Your anger is protective, she told me once. It's your psyche's way of making sure you never let someone treat you that way again. The goal isn't to stop being angry. The goal is to make sure the anger serves you instead of consuming you. I have friends again. Real friends who knew me before Derek and welcomed me back after. My college roommate Jessica flew in from Seattle when she heard what happened and stayed with me for a week, just being there while I processed everything. My best friend from high school, Rachel, who I'd drifted away from during the engagement, reached out with a simple text. I'm here whenever you need me. No judgment. No, I told you so. Just love. I'm dating someone. Nothing serious yet. His name is Marcus, and he's a teacher at a public school on the South Side. We met at a fundraiser for the nonprofit where I work. He thinks it's attractive that I know how to read a financial statement. He's never once suggested I quit my job or asked to merge bank accounts. When we went out for our third date, he pulled out his wallet to pay for dinner, and I flinched. Actually flinched, like he was going to hit me. Hey, he said gently, putting the wallet down. What's going on? I explained, haltingly. About the financial abuse. About how money had been used as a weapon. About how I was still working through it. Okay, he said. We can split it. Or you can pay. Or we can take turns. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. I'm not trying to control you, Sarah. I'm just trying to get to know you. I cried in that restaurant. Happy tears this time. These things shouldn't be remarkable. A man respecting my boundaries and my trauma. But they are. And I'm learning that remarkable things can also be normal things, that healthy relationships don't require you to make yourself smaller. Patricia's business suffered long-term consequences. Beyond Derek stepping down, the family lost their social standing. The country club where my rehearsal dinner happened quietly asked them not to renew their membership. The charity boards Patricia sat on requested her resignation. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back a reputation destroyed by criminal conviction. Derek reached out one more time, about 8 months after our last conversation. An email this time, long and rambling. He said he was in therapy, that he'd moved out of the apartment his mother bought him, that he was working on establishing boundaries with Patricia, that he was sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he wrote. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I want you to know that what you did, walking away and fighting back, it saved my life too. I couldn't see what she was doing to me until I saw what she did to you. I'm trying to be better. I hope you're okay. I didn't respond, not because I was still angry, but because his healing wasn't my responsibility. I hope he's doing better. I hope therapy is helping him. But I don't need to be part of that process. Mr. Caldwell and I still have lunch once a month. He and Marcus, his partner, invited me to their commitment ceremony last spring. It was beautiful, intimate, nothing like the circus my wedding would have been. Just 50 people who loved them, celebrating their love without pretense or performance. At the reception, Mr. Caldwell pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, he said, for surviving, for rebuilding, for turning your pain into purpose. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You had the strength all along, Sarah. I just gave you some resources and support. You did the hard part. Maybe he's right. Maybe I always had that strength, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find it alone. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. It wasn't easy to share, and I know it wasn't easy to hear. Some of you might be uncomfortable right now, recognizing patterns in your own relationships. Some of you might be thinking about a friend or sister or daughter who needs to hear this. Some of you might be defensive, thinking I'm exaggerating or being dramatic. But this is why I do this work. This is why I go to conferences and tell my story to rooms full of strangers. This is why I answer emails at midnight from women asking if they're crazy for thinking their partner might be controlling them. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're not overreacting. If you're questioning whether your relationship is financially abusive, it probably is. Trust that instinct. It's trying to save you. I want to know, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Are you in your car on the way to work? Lying in bed, unable to sleep? Hiding in the bathroom while your partner's in the next room? I see you. I was you. And I'm here to tell you there's a way out. It won't be easy. It might mean starting over. It might mean losing people you love. But you'll get yourself back, and that's worth everything. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away from that rehearsal dinner, or would you have tried to salvage the relationship? I genuinely want to know. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We share stories like this every week. Stories of survival and strength and women reclaiming their lives. If you want more content about recognizing financial abuse, check out the video about Sarah's journey to financial independence after divorce. And if you're interested in learning about legal protections against coercive control, watch our interview with attorney Michelle Rodriguez. Both of those videos are linked in the description. Until the next story, take care of your heart, protect your assets, trust your instincts. And remember, you deserve a partner who celebrates your independence, not someone who systematically dismantles it. You deserve better than I almost settled for. We all do.